Hello out there in virtual land, players and friends. My name is Shayna Farr. I am a member and second vice president of the Players. And today I am broadcasting this conversation from a very special room in the Players. And the Players is a private social club for people of the performing arts and patrons of the arts. It's located on Gramercy Park South in New York City. And if you're thinking to yourself, she is sitting in a room that looks like it's from the late 1800s, you would be correct. I am sitting in the bedroom of Edwin Booth, who was a great American actor, who was not only the greatest Shakespearean actor of the 1800s, he was also the founder of this wonderful club full of theatrical history, costumes, props, artifacts, and home of one of the largest theatrical libraries. So if anything goes wrong during this broadcast, I will guess that Edwin might have something to do with it. Now, much of the club is looked after by the Players Foundation for Theater Education, including this museum quality room. And for more information about supporting our conservation programs, art, the library, this room, you can visit the foundation at playersfoundation.org. And if you want to learn more about this fun, fantastic 134-year-old club and membership, you can visit theplayersnyc.org. Now, without further ado about nothing and lots to do about something, please welcome John Andrews, president of the Shakespeare Guild, among many other things, and Ian McKellen, who really needs no introduction.
Hello.
Hello. And one from John. Hello.
Okay.
Welcome. Ian, welcome
thank you
to
for
the
that lovely
Players.
introduction. Yes.
Yes.
Very nice.
So Ian, have you been to the Players before in New York?
Yes, but so briefly that I remember very little about it, but I think I was allowed to peep into the room that you're in now.
Yes.
I can't see a bed, but there was a bed there.
Yes.
Is it still there?
Yes, so you are seeing half of the room. Behind the camera is his brass bed that's too short for anyone nowadays. A chaise lounge, the portrait of his brother, John Wilkes Booth, which is the only one in this club. But I would like to point out a special little artifact right behind me right there. Do you see that skull?
I do.
Yes,
Yeah.
So that skull belonged to Mr. Lovett. So I don't really know if you speak in past tense or when you're speaking about a skull, but that was a Mr. Lovett who shared a jail cell with Junius Booth. He was in there for horse thievery, and Junius was in there, I'm sure, for disorderly and drunken misconduct. But they struck up a conversation, and Mr. Lovett told Junius he had always wanted to be an actor on stage. And knowing his time on earth was coming to an end, he bequeathed his skull to Junius Booth, who proceeded to then use it in the graveyard scene in Hamlet, passed it down to Edwin, who has signed it. Edwin's signature is on this skull, but the tradition here in New York City is every time Hamlet comes to Broadway on opening night, they use this skull in the show. I think the last one was Jude Law 12 years ago. So, you know, if you let me know who I can contact to get you to Broadway in Hamlet, you can use this skull.
I see. What a lovely story. Have you got there to hand a painting of Edwin Booth?
We have many in our club proper, and next to his bed there is his portrait with his death wreath hanging around it. The story was that when he passed, the doctor dropped a white glove out of the window because there was actually press waiting to find out about his passing so they could report it. So But
I ask because the Royal Shakespeare Company that hangs out in Stratford upon Avon, John knows it very well, where Shakespeare was born and died, had in their collection a number of portraits, one of which was a full-length portrait of a gentleman late 19th century in a suit, who had the look of Laurence Olivier, a younger actor than Edwin Booth. But it turned out that when I was working at Stratford, I lived in an old house, and they'd put some of the stuff that they couldn't fit into their museum. And I found myself sharing a flat with a life-size portrait of not Laurence Olivier, but as it turned out, Edwin Booth. And wow. So I've got a sort of personal connection from. Clearly, you ought to have that full-length portrait, and you might inquire of the Royal Shakespeare Company what they've done with it. Wow. But I haven't seen it for some 30 or 40 years now.
That's wonderful. Well, Ian, in our last conversation, you mentioned that Edwin Booth's last performance was in the role of Hamlet. Mm-hmm. And it took place at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in 1888.
Yes.
And you have performed at BAM on a number of occasions.
I have.
And was that an inspiration for you to revive Hamlet? I guess it's been half a century since you've played the role. Am I correct?
It wasn't an inspiration, but it was an encouragement. I mean, I looked into it, and Booth is not the only old man to have played Hamlet before I did. A little bit different for them, that they had their hits in their repertoire, and so when people wanted to see Edwin Booth's Hamlet, regardless of his age, it's a bit different for me. We're Hamlet's not been in my repertoire, not just because it was 50 years since I first played it, but we don't have repertoires anymore. And I was rather glad actually to think, oh, I've got Hamlet out of the way. For actors like me on the stage in this country, you have to do your Hamlet at some point, as you're pretty well obliged to do Richard III and Iago and King Lear and probably Prospero, and maybe Yorick one day. But it's the idea of my playing it was to see if an audience would disregard what they saw and be grateful for what they heard. And an audience, of course, is a group of people who are there to listen primarily. It took me a year really to agree with Shaw Mathias, the director's request that I play Hamlet. And all I've done basically is try and feel young and think young, and very, very, very occasionally act young in the sense that I sprint up some stairs to a couple of points, and of course do the fight at the end. But basically the audience is seeing an old man, but hopefully hearing a young man, not in the tone of my voice, but in my treatment of the verse, which I've learned a lot about in the intervening 50 years since I first played Hamlet.
And is your performance significantly different this time from what it was in 1971?
Totally different.
Yes.
It's because my acting has changed. I thought 50 years ago that one's job as an actor was to present the play and tell the audience what they should think about it, with the benefit of what the company, the director had thought about it. I don't believe that anymore. I believe the easier way to do Shakespeare and the more effective way, and the I'd even say correct way to do Shakespeare is to speak the words as he wrote them. You've gone, John, but your name is there on the screen. I'm hoping it's
yes. I'm told that I have a low battery, so I'm going to plug in.
Oh no, God!
But no, I think we have a solution at hand here.
Do you have electricity in New Mexico?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Let's see if it's now working.
There we go.
All right, here we are. Okay.
I forgot what I was saying now. So I'm droning on about.
Sorry about that interruption.
You were talking about how it's more the words that now tell instead, the difference between how you did it before and now.
You see, in a largish theatre, we're playing to about 1,000 people a night. If you're sitting on the back row, which frankly is where the people I care most about sit. They're usually young or can't afford it, but are keen. The face, even the body, is not the first form of communication with the actor. They probably can't see the face too clearly, certainly not with the lighting that we've got. They'll get the silhouette of the body, and I can affect a youthfulness at times. But it's basically the voice and the words. And what words? Fortunately, Hamlet, like me, is very keen on the theatre, like us all, and is a bit of an actor himself. So one's got a license to occasionally present. But on the whole, and you can do it often in Hamlet, I'm having a conversation with the audience and asking them questions and hoping for their advice. I like it nothing better when in the middle of a soliloquy they react with a gasp or to be or not to be. That's the question. I mean, have you got an answer? I think is the right tone to take. So all that means that the fact that I'm clearly too old for the part isn't really relevant.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, because there's a woman playing Polonius, Frances Barber, my old mate, and other curiosities in terms of ethnicity and age and gender, doesn't seem to matter to the audience at all. We just come on at the beginning, we present ourselves and say, here we are, this is the troupe of actors who are going to tell you this story, familiar or not. Within minutes, I'm told by friends, they forget that normally they might be offended by what they're seeing or confused, bewildered, and they find themselves listening.
Well, that just goes to prove what you said earlier, that it's the audio and it's what they hear that makes the most powerful impact.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows us to concentrate on what really matters, which is the story. Don't come and look at these familiar actors. Come and listen to a familiar or better still, unfamiliar story.
How many times have you portrayed Hamlet?
Well, I did my 78th performance yesterday, on consecutive.
Right.
And I have one more week to go. Before that, the first time I played it, I must have done it 100 times or more, sometimes in London, sometimes in Stratford. So no records broken, but enough is enough, I'm beginning to say to myself, I think. The trouble is, Hamlet's the only thing in my life at the moment. I can't do anything else. I find it difficult to even boil an egg or take any interest in food. I don't sleep very well. I'm thinking about the play, saying it to myself, having ideas, because I'm not the sort of actor who fixes a performance. I'm always trying to get to enrich it. But I'm looking forward to not having to think about Hamlet anymore. But I will be thinking about another play, which is the second one that the company is going to do in Windsor, and that's Chekhov, where I play the less substantial part of Fierce, who's even older than I am, and has very little to do, I'm glad to say.
I was going to ask, how much time do you have between the end of Hamlet and then the opening of that play?
We have 1 week, and that's technical rehearsals. I mean, we're rehearsing now.
Yeah,
it's how I started my career.
Your repertory.
In repertory company, in the Midlands, in Coventry, at a time when all sizable towns in this country had their own local theatre, subsidised but with local authority money and central funds, and the company would stay together for at least a year. And during that time, well, in Coventry, we did 20 plays during the year. So I'm back doing that, Hamlet at night and Chekhov during the day, and not sleeping at night. You can see why I'm rather keen to let Hamlet go. So I don't think I'll be coming to Broadway.
Will this be transferring to the West End after Windsor?
Well, we've had invitations to do that. We're going to wait and see what happens with the Cherry Orchard, because it's a company doing both plays,
Right.
And I'm not sure Francesca Annis, who was my Juliet long ago,
I remember that.
and is currently playing my father. She's playing the ghost. Whether she would want to go to the West End in that, because in the other play she's playing Ranevskaya, the great part for a beautiful woman like Francesca. So we'll have to see. It's not likely, I don't think.
Yes. Well, I remember that that performance was in 1976, wasn't it?
It was.
In Stratford.
It was. Yes.
And you were also playing Leontes that year. And in that wonderful Scottish play with Judi Dench.
That's right. Yes.
That we do not mention.
Scottish
Yes.
play Leontes and Romeo. Not a bad season, really.
Yes.
Oh, that was hard work. But of course, if you're younger, you don't really notice. You've got time to do all the other nice things in life, like having a good time. I want the good times to come back.
Well, now I hear you own a pub. Is that part of your good times you would like to come back?
Well, I own it with two other people.
Okay.
Sean Sass, who's our director on this occasion, and Evgeny Lebedev, recently become an American citizen and a lord in the House of Lords. But he's thoroughly Russian through and through. Yes, the three of us own the pub. It's because it's close to where I live, and I didn't want it to turn into something else, or even close down, which was a possibility.
Yeah.
It's not a money-making enterprise, but I go in there. People are sometimes surprised and some of them delighted to find Gandalf locking back a pint. I go in on quiz nights on Monday. That's when I go.
Yes. Well, I myself, I spent 3 Christmases with you, Ian. You may not know this, but I was with you on 3 Christmases because our family tradition is after we open the gifts and then have the delicious Christmas dinner cooked by my mom, we go to the movies. And I spent 2001, 2, and 3 Christmas afternoons with you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm surprised it was only 3.
Oh, well, I have you on DVD too.
Middle Earth goes on and on and on, and is continuing.
Yes, I know.
I read a headline the other day in a theater. No, it must have been a film column saying Gandalf returns to Middle Earth. But not Ian McKellen, which could have been, most depressing headline I'd ever read. And then I thought, no, let some other fellow join in the fun. So yes.
You've done a lot of fantasy. I mean, I in particular love the trilogy, and you as Gandalf, but you've done other things, Avengers. Did you use, I assume the answer, but do you use your Shakespeare training and kind of go back to some of the Shakespearean experiences you've had for these characters? Because fantasy and Shakespeare, they're worlds you escape into.
Well, maybe without thinking. Though I remember when I was playing Magneto in the X-Men movies, I kept saying, why doesn't he have a speech? I want a speech. Not just an occasional wisecrack or a long-sided look into the camera. No, give me a speech. And he had to be explained to me that movies are about looking and not about listening primarily. Well, I don't know. It was no difficulty for me to imagine that there was such a person as Magneto or indeed Gandalf.
Yeah.
And I didn't ever think of them as fantasy any more than you would when you were in The Tempest. Think that Ariel who's someone who flies, or Puck in that they are not real. You absolutely accept that. So perhaps Shakespeare is relevant, but the words. I'm sorry that I'm very pleased. There is somebody trying to get hold of me, but I must tell them that they can't help if I can find it. Excuse me. Hello.
And he also has
Zoom.
you know, as I mentioned before, I watched his one-man show, Acting Shakespeare. Well, now there's
Yes.
another live stream option coming out. Ian, I was just telling John
Yeah.
about, you know, having watched your Acting Shakespeare, you now have another one-man live streaming show that just launched, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when I was 80, in order to avoid having any celebrations, I thought I'd get out of town. And for me, getting out of town is not going on holiday, but working somewhere. So I thought I'd do another solo show to celebrate my birthday, sort of autobiographical with me showing off. And I thought I'd go to 80 theatres. Wouldn't that be fun? And 80 theatres around the world. This was before COVID.
Mhm.
And then I realized that there were at least 80 theatres in this country that I could go with less trouble. So that's what I did. I went to 87 theatres, to way north of Scotland and the Isle of Orkney there, and way south to the Isle of Wight and into Northern Ireland and in the other direction, east. And just for 1 or 2 nights. And it was a charity event, really. I didn't charge the theatres, so anything they took at the box office they could use to renovate their theatre or to do projects. And I think I built more women's loos for theatres than anybody alive. But that did come to London for a season, and that's what was recorded and is being shown. And well, if you like the theatre, you'll like the show, because it's all about theatre, or about my relationship with theatre. And although there's Gandalf gets a look in,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Ian, do you have any plans for further Gandalf or Magneto performances? Is anything in the works?
Well, there's a film that's been offered. Films get offered; they don't always get made. I think this one is probably going to get made. But frankly, as far as theatre and films are concerned, I'm looking forward to seeing some and being back as an audience.
Right.
Which was principally why I became an actor, because I liked going to the theatre. So I wanted to find out how it was done. And I haven't been able to go. Well, have any of us?
Yes.
So once I'm not working myself, I'll be able to do a little theatre going, and I shall have a holiday at home, because at the moment I'm not living at home. So I have no prospect for work, but which actually is the first time in my life, I think, I haven't known what the next project was. But I don't care what it is. I'm love to be back on stage, but a film, yes, I'm probably going to do.
I wonder if we could get you to talk a bit about some of the directors you've worked with. I know Trevor Nunn was your classmate at Cambridge,
Yes.
and you did a lot with him at the RSC, and then Sean Matthias, with whom you're working now.
Well, it began all before that, really. The first, it began really when I was at Cambridge University with Derek Jacobi and Trevor Nunn, you've mentioned, and many others who went into the business. And a Don there who directed many of our amateur productions and gave me many early chances as a young actor was John Barton, who later joined his old friend Peter Hall in Stratford-upon-Avon, and where he continued to work with enormous rigor on the text of the classics, and he was very much a mentor and helped me act. And you know, alas, many directors don't help you to act. They don't get to the root of the matter. They land on a moment and say it's wrong, but they aren't always able to see the problem. But John could and was wonderful. And from then onwards, really, I've been dependent on a director telling me, please tell me when it's going wrong. Please help me, please. And I was rewarded by very early as a professional actor working with Tyrone Guthrie, who's well known across the Atlantic as the founder of Stratford, Ontario, and then the Guthrie Theatre in Minneapolis. But he'd worked at the Old Vic and directed Laurence Olivier, and he came to open a new theatre in Nottingham, in the Midlands here, and I was in the company there. And I played Talus Ophidius in his production of Coriolanus, which opened the theatre. And he taught me more in that 3 weeks of rehearsal than many others. But my point is that I've always liked a director to be strong, not in terms of concept of the play or that sort of, because that strength isn't necessarily a help to the actor, but someone who really cares about the problems of acting and is there to guide, direct, and help. And certainly Trevor Nunn did that, primarily with the Scottish play, but also Romeo, which he directed with me, and Ben Jonson, farce, what's that called, with Face and
Volpone, or
the what?
Is it Volpone we're thinking of?
Not Volpone, no, the other one, The Alchemist.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've done Ibsen with him as well. That production of Enemy of the People came to briefly to Los Angeles. Yeah, so he was wonderful on the text, very much in Shakespeare, very much in the way that John Barton had been, and utterly persuaded me that Shakespeare indicates by the way he writes his words how the actor should say them, which means the actor has to understand the techniques of blank verse and rhyming verse and his immaculate prose, but the way the words are placed is probably going to tell you how to inflect and therefore bring out the meaning. And that was Trevor's guidance for me. And since then, yes, Sean, who I used to we used to live together. We're old mates, and we've done lots of stuff together. And the reason I like working with him is that he always tells me the truth. Being my best friend, of course, he's my best critic as well, because he knows me through and through. Yes.
Now, I don't know the answer. Have you ever directed?
Yes, not very well. I did a couple of plays in the West End, both of them starring a name some of your viewers will know, Alistair Sim, who was a great comic film actor, but matchless on stage. He was absolutely in command of the audience's reaction to him, usually comic. But I wasn't a very good director, and I didn't find as much satisfaction in it as just being an actor. I do find myself always having comments, helpful, I think, for the other actors I'm with, but you have to be very careful about taking an actor aside, however friendly you are and behave, because it's sometimes taken amiss. So I could direct actors. I'm not sure that I could direct a play. It's a bit different.
Okay. Yeah.
How about performers? Who are the performers you've most enjoyed working with, Ian?
Well, I'm laughing, which is why I enjoyed it. Patrick Stewart. We did Godot on Broadway and then No Man's Land. Oh, in fact, we did them together, didn't we? Yes, of late. I mean, we've only just discovered each other, although we've had very similar careers, really, in theatre and elsewhere. Judi Dench is an unnerving partner on stage. You can't see how Judy is doing it. You can with most actors. You can see they start acting. Judy turns on a tap of some sort and a faucet, and out of it comes everything that the audience could possibly want. And her relationship with the audience is so intimate that sometimes you feel you're an intruder Not that she's playing exclusive to the audience. No, she's very generous to the other actors, but she can't help it. The audience are busy falling in love with her. So even when she's playing Lady M,
Yeah.
but it's always fun with Judy. She more than any other actor I know, she likes to laugh on stage as well as off. But what you're with on stage is somebody who's fully committed to the experience and able, without showing you how, to switch from tragedy to comedy in a single inflection, you know, and so that's a magical experience. Yeah. I felt the same with Meryl Streep, who I just had one scene within a film called Plenty.
David Hare play, yes.
It was in the 1980s. I was at the National Theatre and only had Sundays off, and so they sweetly arranged the filming around me for my part. So I went in for 3 separate Sundays to film with Meryl, and after 3 days, I said, because we'd got on quite well, I said, Meryl, it would be wonderful if we could do a play together. Oh, yes, let's do. Oh, she said, I can't do a play. She said, I'm getting film parts. She said, but they're going to dry up soon, and then we'll do a play. No, I'm still waiting for it.
Yes. Well, I remember you when you were producing Richard III.
Yes, the film.
The film. And didn't you talk with Meryl about the possibility of playing one of the roles in
yes, well, I might well have done, but I think I got a pretty brisk answer saying no, she was committed elsewhere. Right. But I needn't have worried too much. I mean, in that cast was Annette Bening playing Queen Elizabeth, yes, and Maggie Smith playing my mother. Far too young to be doing that, but anyway. And Jim Broadbent and so many, John Ward, so many wonderful actors. They were very good to come and help their colleague along with his foolhardy venture of making a film. I'll never do it again, but I'm very glad I did do it. And
I think it's the most brilliant Shakespearean film ever made.
Oh, I say, John, that's wonderful.
I can't think of anything that rivals it, because you did such a beautiful job of taking a Renaissance text and making it completely contemporary.
Yes. Well, you know, you can do that with Shakespeare, and I've learned very recently that that's what I want to do, not by distorting it. For example, when Hamlet bumps into Ophelia, he'd previously been to her room, having told his friends he's going to behave a bit oddly, a bit madly, and goes in and has a mime scene with her, which she reports. But then, having decided that the relationship's got to stop, and her having been told that it's got to stop by her father, the two of them meet. And it's the most curious scene in which both are trying to break up a relationship, and neither of them wants to. It's
yes,
wonderful brief scene. But it begins with her saying, how are you? Or words to that effect. And I say, well, God have mercy. And I look at her and say, well. Well, I think Shakespeare probably meant the well to refer to how he was feeling, but that contemporary notion of, well, what have we got here, fits the scene so beautifully that perhaps that's what Shakespeare meant all along. But you can sometimes trick the audience into hearing familiar lines in a new way.
Yes.
And that's I've been helped doing To Be or Not to Be, but we decided that it would be a one-sided conversation with Horatio. It's usually a conversation with the audience, perhaps, but rather than just inner thoughts. But for him to be puzzling out whether he should follow what he takes to be his destiny and risk death, and what does that entail? It's much easier to play if you've got somebody to talk to, and that means that you want them to really understand, and that means that you won't be thinking I'm speaking Elizabethan blank verse. You'll be thinking, no, I'm an alive young man who's got a problem that he wants to solve. It's a question of attitude, really.
And so the most famous soliloquy in the world turns out not to be a soliloquy.
Well, it begins with me taking out my tables, my little notebook, which Hamlet has. After he's seen the ghost, the first things he does is I've got to write this down. So I come on with Horatio, yes, and he's wheeling a chair, and I've got my notebook in my hand, and I've written large enough for the audience to see if they can glance, to be or not to be. Well, that's the question. Let's talk about that.
Yes.
And by the end, I'm writing more things down, like thoughts and coward and things that are in his mind. So it becomes a scene rather than a speech.
You know, one of our viewers was curious whether there is any role you've played that you feel most comfortable with and that makes you feel most like yourself. Does that happen?
Well, not Richard III, and not, if I can say it in this company, not Macbeth. No, not Hamlet. Well, I do feel, because he's full of me and I'm full of him at the moment. Hamlet, I do respond to the fact that he's a man of the theatre, or loves the theatre so much, and thinks it's important in life. But no, not Leontes. Romeo. Well,
yes.
Sometime or other. No, I don't think I've ever. I think really what I began as an actor, I enjoyed dressing up and putting on makeup and being anything other than me.
Right.
That was probably because I had problems with my identity, which was private as a gay man, shared with my friends and close associates, but not beyond that. And acting for me began as a form of disguise. So determined not to be myself. Now, once I came out, my acting changed overnight. I recommend it to anybody who's thinking of coming out, whatever their job. My acting became not about a disguise, but about revelation, about revealing, about bringing as much of myself as I possibly could to the part. But there's usually something about every part you play that you just simply have to imagine. It's not part of your experience, you know, whether it's intense jealousy or murderous or something. Iago. I mean, there are bits of Iago that you can relate to, the man who is nice to everybody. I try to be that, but I'm not also trying to put them ruin their lives.
Yes. Didn't Alec Guinness write a memoir entitled Blessings in Disguise?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Yes, he did. Yes.
Shana, you had a question, I know.
Yeah. When you were preparing for all of these characters that you played, you use a lot of different voices and you really seem to become that person. do you imagine what the person looks like and how they sound and how they move? Or sometimes do you have someone in your life you've met who you kind of use as an inspiration to look and feel and sound? How do you?
Well, yes, a bit of all those things.
Okay.
But I discovered very early on something that I don't think science had quite discovered. DNA. If one day the director says to you, "Oh, you know, when you picked up that teacup, you did it exactly as the character would do it."
Mm-hmm.
And having been told that, using an actor's imagination, you then start to speak like your gesture, and you start to walk like the gesture, because everything's connected.
Yeah.
And you find yourself sounding like the gesture, and even looking like. You see what I mean? You can just take one little bit of the character, and through your imagination, very, very rapidly, I find, let it flow into everything. And so that's what I'm always on the lookout, something. And I'll practice at home by myself, not in front of a mirror, just saying lines, and I'll hear something and think, oh, that might be the clue to what will open up everything else. So it's usually a voyage of discovery rather than saying, oh, I saw that person in the street, or I've got a friend who's exactly like this character, because it would be very unlikely that you knew anybody who was exactly like a Shakespeare character. They're so unique.
Yeah. Let's see.
Shana, you were going to ask something about advice for the players.
Oh, yes, maybe this would be a good time for that.
Yes.
Because, yeah, I mean, I guess we are getting close to the question and answer time. So, yes, Ian, do you have any advice for players?
Do you mean the club?
Oh, no, players.
Oh,
Actors,
players.
players.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue.
Yes.
If you mouth it, as many of our players do, I'd rather hear the town bull bellow. Now, that may be an unfamiliar line to you, John, but it's in the quarto.
I like that. Good.
Yes, it's good, isn't it?
Yes.
For those who don't know what a quarto is, it's an early printed version of the play.
I actually prefer that text to the folio. A lot of readings.
I also like the line, instead of, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I, it's, oh, what a dunghill idiot slave am I. Well, you immediately know what a dunghill
Yes.
slave is, don't you?
Yes.
But the advice to the players, it rings absolutely true. Do not saw the air too much with your hand, thus. No, use all gently. Suit the action to the word to the action. With the special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature for anything so overdone from the purpose of playing, whose end both at first and now was and is to hold as to the mirror up to nature, to show virtue, her own feature, scorn, her own image, and the very age and body of the time, his own form and pressure. And then, being a director, he says to the actor to whom he's talking, go, get you ready. Go and put on your makeup. I've given you your notes. But that advice, which is much longer in the printed version of the play, is incontrovertible. It's right. It's how to act. It of course, one's sense of what is being true to nature might change as the centuries go by, and I'm sure Edwin Booth's acting would look a little strange to us today, but for his contemporaries, no. I'm sure he was praised, as all great actors have been, for being so real. And I love the story of when Richard Burbage died, the man who first played all these great parts for Shakespeare. A fan heard that he died. He said,
Richard Burbage died. No, 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 no. I saw him die as Othello. Now, that degree of what we would call naturalism,
Yes.
being, gives the lie to our sense of what acting has been like in the past, with overblown gestures and so on, large voices to fill large theatres. And our sense of what is natural and real may change, but the aim is always the same. And I think that's what he means by holding the mirror up to nature.
Yeah.
Has
Wow.
it struck you that Hamlet is a kind of operator's manual for the actor?
You could do a lot worse,
Yes.
particularly if, like me, you didn't go to drama school, and where else are you going to get advice? Yes, I would like to have been directed by Hamlet. I think he would have been very helpful.
Yes. Have you ever played Polonius?
Nope. No,
Would that
I
be-
suppose that's a possibility. Though these days, with the way we're throwing the casting around, perhaps I'm far too young. I don't know. I'm rather excited by what Sean has done with our company, which is, as I say, to mix everything up and say, look, it's just these actors telling this story. Because there is a movement at the moment to do almost exactly the opposite and say that you can't play Othello unless your skin color is dark
Yes.
any longer. Some people say to play Richard III, that must go to an actor who is himself disabled. And I've heard people say only gay people should play gay parts. You begin to think, what is left?
Yes.
And we're doing exactly the opposite. We're saying anybody can play anything. So the disabled actor will be there, the person of short stature will be there, people from different ethnicities will be there and different ages. But our insides are remarkably similar. And that is the insides one's going for in a play.
Right.
And those insides are revealed, of course, by the words, audience. And if you're doing Shakespeare, the words cannot be improved upon. So your quid's in, really.
Yeah.
I think that's really a wonderful development, and I hope it catches on.
Yes, me too.
So I have a question. I have some audience questions. Paul asks, what is the primary emotion at the end of a performance? Are you just completely exhausted or exhilarated? Or how does that feel?
Relieved it's over, glad it's over, because there's never been a play I've done that I haven't each night thought about some scene or speech or line or word or gesture or entrance that I haven't quite got right yet. And when the performance is over, you think, well, at least that's over. I've got another chance tomorrow night. No, I don't feel tired ever, always energized. And that's a fact of life, that the more you exercise, the less tired you feel.
Yeah.
In the long run. And that's, I'm sure you feel the same after one of your performances. You could go on singing all night.
Yeah.
And so I feel better. It feels I was once told by a shrink that every time an actor went onto the stage, he knocked 5 minutes off his life because it was such a terrifying thing to do for internal organs. But no, I feel the opposite, that I'm ready for what's left of the day, and which usually means staying up far too late and then on to the next day,
Right.
which will always center around the performance and sometimes twice a day. And so you have to be rigorous in saving, I find, saving everything up for the performance. And when the performance is over, not relief, glad to be alive, happy to be an actor. And if it's gone well, then mission accomplished, because we're only there to do it for an audience, and a play doesn't exist if nobody's watching it. A film does. A film can play through with nobody looking at the screen. But no, if there's no audience, no play.
Right. And you use that energy from the audience as the actor, like you.
Oh,
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 they're a part of it.
I know. I think when you say that to an audience, they don't quite believe it, but I believe it because I've been in an audience.
Yeah.
And I want an audience who isn't sitting back waiting to receive, but is leaning forward, ready to give, you know. And that's another thing, John, I've discovered quite recently about Shakespeare, is you don't have to interpret it. You don't have to limit it by saying the trouble with King Lear is he's got a specific problem physically with his brain, and they can be identified. Modern medicine can tell you what it is and give it a name. How does that help any matters? Is King Lear mad? Is Hamlet mad? I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
You decide and disagree and talk about it. But I just do the lines as they turn up with as much conviction as I can. If they contradict what's been said in the previous scene, I leave that contradiction. I don't try and explain it away. I'm not forever presenting the character. And that's what I was doing with Hamlet way, way back. I was walking alongside the character, presenting him to the audience. No. You've got to be inside him and just present what the lines are, and the audience will decide whether you're good or bad or stupid or praiseworthy.
They can all think differently.
They can all think differently.
That's how we keep making discoveries about
That's
Shakespeare.
right. So we have another question from Zoe Gray, expanding on the casting conversation we just had. And obviously you're playing Hamlet at the age of 82. Are there any other Shakespearean roles you would like to perform now that there is more, opportunity in diverse casting?
No, look, I mustn't be greedy. I've been very lucky. I've played all these, so many of the parts, and if there'd been older actors playing them, I would have been very annoyed. That
Okay.
for a long time, I wanted to play Mercutio, but as an older person. And Derek Jacobi got there before me and did it when in a Ken Banner production. I think Mercutio, as an old man, an older man, gay probably, loves hanging out with the young boys and is dreadful about talking about women and about their love affairs. That would be a very interesting part to play for me to play. But and Antonio in The Merchant of Venice, well, he is the Merchant of Venice, not Shylock. Shylock's not the merchant.
Yes.
So Antonio's right at the heart of that play, and I'd love to do it, and very nearly did do it in the film, because it's one of the few obviously gay characters in Shakespeare. In sooth, I know not why I'm so sad.
Yes.
Well, we soon find out why he's sad. It's because his boyfriend just told him he's going to get married.
Yes.
That's hard. So I would like to do Antonio. I think it's an undiscovered part, really.
I agree with you. Yes.
Yes, in its depth.
Yes.
I've done Prospero, not well, but at least I've done it. And the one part which sort of stands up as a challenge and is Falstaff. But I don't get Falstaff. I can't get it. I've never understood him when I've read him or seen him in full. Although I did enjoy going to see Henry IV in the open air and in Central Park. Free theatre. I was sitting next to a woman who brought her children along, and she was so engaged by Falstaff. And then Falstaff dies or appears to die on the battlefield. And she let out a gasp of regret. Oh, no. She thought, oh, God, is he gone? And I just stopped myself saying, it's all right. He's only pretending. But that's how Shakespeare works. And if you haven't ever seen or read the plays before, of course, they're full of surprises.
Yes.
The friend who was hearing my lines for Hamlet, we got to Act 5 and he suddenly looked up from the script. He said, oh my God, Hamlet dies.
And we maybe time for one more. Haley asks, is there a character you've played that has changed you as a person or changed a worldview for you?
There probably is. And you do learn from them all, really. I think what I learned quite early on, playing not very nice people, that human beings are capable of anything, really.
Yeah.
The heights of ecstasy and the depths of degradation. And even the same person can be capable of both. And it's made me very cautious about saying, even of someone like Adolf Hitler, that he was pure evil. He loved dogs, you know, and he was a vegetarian. Oh, I've got something in common with that man. And I don't believe in good and evil. I believe in people being good and doing something that might want to call evil, but to say that someone was born evil or had become evil, I'm happy to go along with the modern medicine saying, no, this person is sick.
Yeah.
It's a rather deep conversation.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I think everybody is born good, and it's you know, there are bad things that come along, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course. And
yeah. One more question.
right.
Gods and Monsters
Yes.
from 1998 is a favorite of many players, in which you worked with our former president, the late Lynn Redgrave. And that film seemed to make you much more recognizable to American audiences. Is that how it seemed to you, as kind of an American film for you?
It was a perfect part for me to play, in that James Whale, the film director, was born in roughly the part of the world that I was, came to London as I did to be part of the theatre, not as an actor, but as a designer, and by chance as a director, and then went to Hollywood, where he was the most highly paid director of his time. And I went to Hollywood, and he was openly gay in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know a bit about that too. So, and I even had a slight look of James Whale. So once I dyed my hair white, it was, which I had to do in those days, I just sort of landed right in the middle of it. And yes, it was wonderful to film a Hollywood story with an English character at its center. And we filmed in Hollywood, and we filmed in the oldest working studio in Hollywood, which still had the glass roof from the time when they used to film in sunlight that came in through the roof, the glass ceiling. And I felt very much part of the camaraderie, which is somewhere at the heart of Hollywood filmmaking. It was an important film in that it's one of the earliest films, I think, to take a gay person seriously on their own terms, and not treat them as either point of ridicule or distaste or something. It's just a person. And so for those who responded to the film in that way, I think it was an important film. And Bill Condon, the director, happily won the Oscar for his screenplay. Great night.
It's a wonderful film, and Lynn was terrific in that film.
Oh, Lynn. Well, now, Lynn, I knew her brother at university, Corin, her elder brother.
Yes.
Then I fell in with Lynn when we were both at the National Theatre. We were both at the National Theatre under Laurence Olivier, and in that company in the old Bake was Maggie Smith and Joan Plowright and Billy Whitelaw and Geraldine McEwen and Michael Gambon and Anthony Hopkins, Derek Jacobi, Jeremy Brett, on and on we go, and Lynn. And we giggled a lot together. And I did one of my first television with her little story, a sad story about an unhappy love affair. And I kept in touch with Lynn when she moved to the States, and to come back and spend time with her on the film was lovely.
Well, we have a
Yes.
portrait of her hanging up here in the club. So,
She was a dear girl, and like all that family, principled.
mhm.
Of course,
Yes.
her elder sister is more famous, I suppose, for her political stances. But Lynn, in her own way, and when she took her child onto the set and breastfed her, was thought to be an outrage. But I hope it's commonplace these days. Yes.
They all knew how to make good trouble, to quote John Lewis, the congressman. Yes.
I like
And
that.
her father, Michael Redgrave, I saw play Hamlet when he was 54, and I don't remember finding that distasteful or difficult. You see how I'm always thinking about Hamlet. I relate practically everything said to myself at the moment. I'm sorry.
Edwin Booth, it was the last character he played, and he was in his
Yeah.
50s. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, was he only 50? I've gone
Yeah.
I
around.
think it was around 55, wasn't it?
Oh, 50.
Yeah.
Which would have been quite old at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
When I first played Hamlet, so two theatre historians rushed into my dressing room after and said, "Congratulations, you're our 73rd Hamlet." Oh dear. And the next Hamlet in London, we close next Saturday, and the following Monday, there's another Hamlet at the Young Vic, where a black woman is playing Hamlet.
Wow.
So
Wow.
up for grabs, up for grabs.
Wow. Glad to hear it. Interesting.
I'm sure she wouldn't want to be called have either of those epithets. That's not the point. She's an actor.
Yeah.
And she's as much right to as I have to be doing it, I think.
Yeah.
And audiences will decide whether they like it or not. Let the audience decide. Let us throw things out there and see what the reaction is.
That's what keeps things moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, it was lovely speaking with you. Thanks for sharing your evening with us, our afternoon.
Yes, I'm going to
And,
have a meal now.
Congratulations, and have a wonderful last bit of your run.
Thank you.
Hope you can grab a pint at your pub soon
Yes.
and off to the Cherry Orchard. And John, thank you for putting this all together under the Shakespeare
Thank you, Shana.
Guild.
You're a wonderful hostess.
Well, thanks.
And Ian, Jan and I are looking forward to seeing you next Saturday night.
I'm so jealous.
I can't believe that will be the last night.
Will that be the final performance?
That will be the
Wow.
final performance.
How about that?
I'm so jealous. We'll have to talk about it, John. All right. So at this time, clap virtually, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to turn the Facebook live stream off. Goodbye to Facebook and goodbye to the Zoom. It was a lovely speaking with all of you, and we will do it again. All right. Bye.
Thank you, Shana.
Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Ian.